Welcome to RP Revenge.
The words struck her like a slap. Let her sleep on the floor. She's used to that kind of thing anyway. Miriam froze at the bottom of the stairs, her hand tightening around the railing until her knuckles turned white. Her knees trembled. The sound came from upstairs, her daughter-in-law Zara's voice, sharp, dripping with contempt. Her son's muffled reply followed. "Zara, that's my mother you're talking about." "Oh, please," Zara scoffed. "Your mother acts like this house is still hers. She needs to learn her place." Miriam's chest tightened. Her place. She built this house. Every brick, every tile, every inch of its glossy marble floors came from her blood and sweat. It was her dream home, the one she'd given to her only son, Adil, when he married, believing love meant sacrifice. Now she stood like an unwanted ghost in it. That night, she lay on a thin mattress in the guest room, the one that used to be her late husband's study. She could hear them laughing upstairs, the faint thud of footsteps, the low hum of music, Zara's light, carefree giggles, and something inside her twisted painfully. Once, that laughter would have made her smile. Now, it only reminded her how far away she'd fallen from her own son's heart. The betrayal didn't come suddenly. It seeped in like water through cracks. Slowly, silently. Miriam moved into Adil's house 6 months ago, after her health began to decline. Her doctor had warned her about the early stages of arthritis and the risk of falling if she continued living alone. Zara had smiled sweetly back then, all fake sympathy. "Of course she can stay with us," Zara had told Adil. "It's her home too." Miriam remembered that moment vividly. Zara's hand on her arm, her eyes shining like glass marbles. The warmth was all on the surface. Underneath there was calculation. The first few weeks were fine. Zara cooked elaborate dinners, took Miriam to her appointments, even bought her new slippers, "So your feet don't hurt, Amy." But things changed the day Adil got his promotion. Zara began dropping subtle hints. That Miriam was old-fashioned. That her ways made the house feel cramped. She stopped sitting with Miriam during tea, stopped asking about her day, and started correcting her in front of the maids. And Adil, he just stayed quiet. It was the silence that broke Miriam's heart, not Zara's words but her son's silence. That night, after hearing Zara's cruel remark, Miriam turned to the wall and wept quietly. She thought of her husband, gone 8 years now. If he'd been alive, he would never have allowed this humiliation. She whispered into the darkness, "You'd be ashamed of what they've become." When she finally fell asleep, her pillow was damp with tears. Morning sunlight flooded the house the next day, making everything look deceptively beautiful. The marble floor gleamed, the curtains fluttered softly, and the smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Miriam shuffled in, her joints aching. Zara stood at the counter, wearing one of Miriam's old silk shawls like it was hers. She didn't even glance up. "Good morning," Miriam said quietly. Zara hummed in reply, scrolling through her phone. "There's no breakfast for you yet. You didn't say you wanted any." Miriam blinked. I always have tea and toast." "Oh, I didn't know you wanted that again." Her tone was clipped, almost mocking. Miriam's eyes moved to the dining table. 2 plates set, 2 cups, 2 slices of toast. Adil and Zara's breakfast. Nothing for her. Something broke a little deeper inside her chest. When Adil walked in, Miriam thought maybe he'd notice. But he kissed Zara on the cheek, murmured something about a meeting, and left without even looking her way. Zara smiled sweetly after him, then turned to Miriam. "You know, Amy, men don't like tension at home. Maybe you could stay with your sister for a bit. Give us some space." Her voice was syrupy. Miriam swallowed the lump in her throat. "I thought I was family." "You are," Zara said with a bright smile, brushing imaginary dust off the counter. "Just extended family." The word extended stung more than a slap. By afternoon, Miriam sat in the small courtyard, watering her plants. Her hands trembled with age and pain, but she still cared for them tenderly. The jasmine bush she'd planted years ago bloomed wildly, its white flowers glowing in the sunlight. She thought of the day Adil was born, how she'd held him close, whispering promises that she'd give him everything she never had. She'd kept that promise, paid for his education, sold her jewelry for his wedding, even signed over the house. Everything she had was his. And now she was just a burden. She could still hear Zara's laughter echoing through the hallway that evening when Zara's friends came over. "Don't mind her," she told them, nodding toward Miriam sitting quietly in a corner. "She's just old school." They giggled. Miriam smiled weakly, pretending she didn't hear. But inside, something in her hardened. That night, as she lay awake again, she made a decision. She couldn't fight Zara's cruelty with words. It would only make her look petty. And she couldn't count on Adil's support. He was blind in his devotion. But there was one thing Zara didn't know. The house wasn't hers yet. Yes, the deed had been transferred to Adil, but Miriam had quietly placed a condition in the document. A living trust that required her written consent for any sale, transfer, or mortgage. Without her signature, nothing could be done. It was her last safeguard. A flicker of something, cold, deliberate, stirred inside her chest. She'd spent a lifetime being gentle. Maybe now it was time to stop. Over the next few weeks, Miriam began observing, quietly, watching how Zara ran the house, where she spent money, how she treated the staff, how she managed her husband. She saw Zara's patterns, her constant online shopping, her secretive phone calls, her growing irritation when Adil came home late from work. One night, Miriam heard voices again, louder this time. "You said you'd talk to her." Zara snapped. "She's my mother, Zara." Adil shot back. "I can't just throw her out." "Then I'll do it myself," Zara hissed. "I can't live like this, like she's watching everything I do." Miriam's hand trembled around the teacup she held. She stayed quiet, but inside she began crafting her plan. She started by visiting her old lawyer, an elderly man named Mr. Farouk who'd handled her husband's estate years ago. She told him she wanted to review the trust document. He smiled kindly, unaware of the fire behind her calm eyes. After that day, Miriam moved with silent precision. She began sorting through documents, collecting receipts, and making quiet phone calls to the bank. She didn't tell anyone what she was doing, not even her sister who had begged her to come stay. Then one evening, she overheard something that confirmed every fear she'd ever had. Zara was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low but sharp. "Yes, once the house is under my name, we can move forward. He trusts me completely. Just a few more months." Miriam's blood ran cold. Under her name. She pressed her back to the wall, the phone trembling in her hand. She didn't need to hear more. The betrayal was complete. Zara wasn't just cruel, she was scheming. And Miriam was done being the silent one. She went to bed that night with her heart pounding, not in fear, but in resolve. Her mind replayed Zara's smug laughter, the disdain in her voice, the way she said, "Let her sleep on the floor." If Zara wanted to see her on the floor, fine. But soon it would be Zara crawling. The next morning dawned quiet, deceptively peaceful. But Miriam felt something shift inside her. Not weakness this time, but control. She'd spent months mourning her dignity. Now she was ready to reclaim it. Her revenge, she decided, wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, deliberate, the kind that left scars long after the shouting ended. Over the following days, Miriam played her part perfectly. She smiled when Zara spoke, nodded obediently when she gave orders, and kept her head bowed like a defeated woman. It disarmed Zara completely. Zara started to treat her with careless ease, mocking her in front of the maids, talking over her at dinner, even making remarks like, "You should be grateful, Amy. Not everyone your age gets to live in such a big house." Miriam would just smile faintly and reply, "You're right, beta. Not everyone does." Inside she was counting days. Adil was as distant as ever. He worked late, came home distracted, and seemed oblivious to the Cold War under his roof. Miriam didn't hate him, she pitied him. He was the son she'd raised with too much softness, the man who mistook passivity for peace. But soon he'd learn too. A week later, Miriam invited a few guests, old family friends, people who still thought of her as the proud matriarch she once was. She hadn't hosted anyone in ages. Zara wasn't pleased. "Why didn't you ask me first?" Zara hissed that morning. "It's just tea," Miriam replied, her tone mild. "You don't need to worry. I'll serve them myself." Zara rolled her eyes but said nothing more. By evening, the living room filled with warm chatter and the clink of teacups. Miriam wore one of her silk saris, the same one she'd worn at Adil's wedding, and smiled graciously at her guests. When someone asked if she still owned the house, she answered sweetly, "Oh yes. My late husband made sure everything would stay secure for me. Even now, nothing happens here without my permission." Zara's face went pale. She excused herself and stalked to the kitchen, pretending to refill tea, but Miriam caught the flash of fear in her eyes. It was the first crack in her perfect facade, and Miriam savored it like a breath of air after years underwater. That night, Zara confronted Adil. Miriam heard every word through the thin wall between their rooms. "Why didn't you tell me your mother still controls the house?" Zara's voice trembled with anger. "What are you talking about?" Adil sounded genuinely confused. "She told everyone tonight. She said you can't make any decisions without her consent." "That's not true. She signed the house over." "Then show me the papers." There was a pause. The sound of drawers opening, papers shuffling, then silence. Miriam smiled in the dark. She knew exactly what he was looking at. The trust document she and her lawyer had drafted 8 years ago. The one that made it very clear. No sale, mortgage, or transfer without the living owner's written approval. Her approval. Zara didn't sleep in their room that night. The sound of her heels clicking down the hall at midnight was the sweetest lullaby Miriam had heard in years. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the house thickened. Zara avoided Miriam, her once smug tone replaced by brittle politeness. Adil grew quieter too, burdened by the unease he couldn't name. But Miriam wasn't done yet. She had no intention of simply protecting her power. She intended to reclaim what was hers. The opportunity came in March. Zara had invited her brother and his wife to stay, for a few weeks. Miriam didn't object. She even helped prepare the guest room. But one afternoon, while watering her plants, she overheard Zara's brother on the phone. "Don't worry, once we get her signature, Adil will think it was his idea. Then we can flip the property." Miriam's hands froze around the watering can. The betrayal was deeper than she imagined. Zara wasn't just cruel. She was orchestrating a complete theft, using Adil's ignorance to sell the very home Miriam's husband had built. That night, Miriam sat at her desk and wrote 2 letters, one to her lawyer, Mr. Farouk, and one to her bank. Her hands shook as she signed the papers, but her heart was calm. When she finished, she looked around her room, the old clock ticking softly, the smell of jasmine drifting through the window, and whispered, "Enough." The next morning, the servants found a note on the dining table. Miriam had gone to stay with her sister for a while. Zara laughed when she read it. "Finally," she told Adil. "Maybe now we can have peace." Peace lasted exactly 5 days. On the 6th morning, a registered letter arrived, addressed to both Adil and Zara. Inside was a formal notice from Miriam's lawyer. Notice of property reversion. In accordance with the living trust agreement dated March 12, 2017, the current trustee, Mrs. Miriam Hanif, has exercised her right to revoke the transfer of the property located at 14B Clifton Heights. All ownership, authority, and tenancy privileges are hereby nullified effective immediately. Zara read the letter 3 times before she understood. Miriam had legally taken back the house. Every room, every inch of marble floor, every wall, belonged to her again. Zara's reaction was instant. She stormed into the lawyer's office, waving the letter. "She can't do this. We've lived there for years." Mr. Farouk, calm as ever, adjusted his glasses. "I'm afraid she can. You see, Mrs. Haniff never relinquished full control. The condition was clear. Her consent was required for permanent transfer, and she has now revoked it. Zara's voice cracked. But where will we live? He looked at her over the rim of his glasses. Perhaps where she was expected to sleep. On the floor, maybe? When Miriam returned 2 weeks later, the house was quiet. The curtains drawn, the rooms empty. Adil stood in the living room, a shadow of himself. He looked at her, eyes red. You really did it. She met his gaze evenly. I warned you once, Adil. Respect is a debt, not a favor. He swallowed hard, guilt flashing across his face. She left. I know, Miriam said softly. You'll be fine. You just need to remember who raised you. There was no anger in her tone, only a quiet, worn-out sadness. She didn't need to scream. The silence between them said enough. Weeks passed. Miriam moved through her home with peace she hadn't felt in years. The jasmine bush outside bloomed again, just as it did when her husband was alive. Sometimes she still heard echoes of Zara's laughter, not with bitterness, but with a strange kind of clarity. The girl had wanted everything: status, comfort, power, but she'd forgotten one thing. The house had a soul, and it remembered who built it. One evening, as Miriam sat by the window sipping tea, her phone buzzed. A message from Adil. I'm sorry, Ami. I should have protected you. Miriam stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Just be the kind of man your father would have been proud of. She set the phone aside and looked out into the fading sunset. The world outside was quiet, orange light spilling across the floor, the smell of jasmine heavy in the air. For the first time in years she felt weightless. She didn't need revenge anymore. She'd already won. Because the cruelest kind of revenge. Peace. The end.